I'm going to be eating a little bit.
Yeah, it's all good. I know I just ate a second ago. Yeah, so I mean, well, let's talk about how, yeah, let's like open this up. So this is, well, first off, this is our Esoteric Book Club meeting, Meditations on the Tarot. We're talking about the Hanged Man. But prior to recording, Cody and I were discussing element work and just how like balancing the element space and then void. But Cody, you wanted to talk a little bit more about that, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of juggling to be done with balancing elements. It is the mad just juggling the the elements. Whereas I think there's like a lot to be said for just like letting all that go, at some point, like, because it's a lot of contrivance, it's like, whereas like I guess I've just been reading so much Buddhist stuff of just like this emptiness, like we have built all these like stories in our heads, these elements in our heads, and like, but it's all just all just games, it's just juggling stuff. Whereas like I think like there's an ideal of like achieving kind of and I think in the case of the Hanged Man card and the Meditations on the Tarot, it's like the ability to achieve like that gnosis, the union with God, like, and like going by the will of the divine, and I kind of don't agree with his like, I continue to not agree with his like top down kind of vertical alignment designation. I think the divine is everywhere and is among us. It's just like it's more just like a depth. It is a depth. I like his idea of depth that's like goes beyond just the surface. It's like it's the ground of like empty awareness, as the Buddhist calls it. But it's like, but it like he uses words like the divine, like light of the divine and stuff like that, which I think like the illumination and like, and that's what the Buddhists use in terms of emptiness, like it's luminous emptiness, So I think there is an analog with that. I think that is I think I think they're talking about the same thing. The luminous emptiness is God. But that's the ground on which everything else can be stacked. Our experience can be stacked in a sense. Like without that, we can have no experience. But that's eternal, and experience is ephemeral, But experience is a beautiful thing. Like it's not, yeah. So I think he like creates this dichotomy almost where like the experience is like bad somehow. Sometimes it feels that way in the book.
Yeah, I noticed that as well, and I think I took it to the logical extreme that you did as well, which like, well, what's like if experience is, yeah, like that, like of what I mean, samsara, you have earth, of the serpent, of samsara, of whatever you want to call it, right? Like what's the point according to him? Like it would be to transmute divine source energy or whatnot, or I mean he wouldn't call it that, but like transmute the divine light into manifestations on earth. But it's like I just don't see the equation as being like all experience on serpent territory is something that we should fight against, or yeah, I mean grind for. It's like you can have this like flow within it that you're just like things are just kind of coming into your sphere. Like I'm working on right now in my life, like what effort do I need to get to, like the equation's right here, so like where do I push and pull, how much do I push and pull here to get things into my field like that? And I think that it gets, I hope, and like, my playing around with these things is that it gets to a point where, yeah, things can just come in and out of your thing like a flowing without like a lot of effort, that's like a lot of like this like grind that you're talking about. Yeah. Like, yeah. It's not like you have to like do all these things in order to make it to where this is. It's like, okay, it's just can kind of be like equalizing to a point where you just have things come into your sphere. Like they don't need to
Yeah.
be like, they're just already there. It's just coming into your appearance, you know, into your periphery, and like having it be a part of your experience now.
Yeah. And just kind of like, yeah, it's like breathing in and out. It's like not, you're not like worried about getting it, but you're like, that would be cool. You know, it'd be cool to have this thing, you know,
Be cool to
like,
breathe again.
yeah, breathe in, create, you know, it's create, and it's creative energy. But I think that like, and I think this book, I think he really does give a method towards that. So to like quite a bit, because he's like, he doesn't fully talk about like the fully transcended person. Like a hermeticist is like still on the earth, you know, he talks about like we're still here doing stuff. So like there's, it's just how much of the divine we allow in to our heart chakra, you know, or like through our head and into the heart. Like how much can we do that? And once, and when we're like really centered in the heart, then like we have a lot of flexibility. We can like let things in and out, and like and I think, yeah, I mean, I think this chapter talks a lot about that stuff.
Yeah.
I really like it. I really like this chapter. I really like this card. It's one of my like favorite. I've had like some of the best experiences with this card.
That's so cool. That's cool. I like this chapter as well. Um, I related, I mean, again, I feel like a lot of these like coincide with things that you go through in life. And I definitely feel a lot of the things that he's talking about of being, you know, in that in between state of, you know, receiving a message and how do you manifest it, you know? Um, I mean, that's, you know, not quite what he goes into, but I mean, I feel like that's the overall, like, yeah, I feel like it's very, lining up with my life in that way, which is cool. But I mean, I feel like every chapter kind of does, but that's because you kind of can, you know? Um, and that's, you just make whatever you kind of see out of it. But I could see how different aspects of my life are relating to this card now.
Well,
But
yeah, I mean, naturally it does because it is representational of archetypes that are just existent, you know? I really think. And
yeah.
just we just notice it and we start looking into it and we see like, oh yeah, this relates to this. And yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's trippy. Um, do we want to go line by line, or I mean not line by line, but like, you know, section by
Kind of go
section?
section by section, see what interests us in each one.
Yeah, I mean, so he starts off talking about like gravitation, page 306 for those following along on YouTube. Yeah, he's just so physical, psychic, and spiritual. I liked this little bit. I mean, just seeing how, I mean, the portion I highlighted, the fall as a phenomenon can certainly be understood as the passage from one gravitational field to another. I thought that was really cool because it's that also like, I mean, I've had some pretty like, you know, visceral fall kind of imagery brought about in different psychedelic experiences that I've had. And I mean, I really like this definition of it because it kind of gets into like every, and that's like the Bardos of, you know, the last book in Love with the World that we read, like every day you're going through little mini deaths, and every day we're going through little mini falls, you know, of these kind of, but and I really liked the comparison to gravitational fields, like a passage from one gravitational field to another. Like I don't think every form of suffering is that, but I think a lot of, if you know you're mindful of your spiritual path and you really like pay attention to that, like I do think that a lot of these different things that we feel and experience are just, yeah, growing pains making you uncomfortable so that you can grow a little bit, or that your field can expand in a different way than you have before. And describing it like a fall is really interesting, I think, in terms of like Christian hermetic definitions, you know. um
Yeah. Yeah, I like it too. I'm gonna keep like comparing it to some of the Buddhist stuff that
yeah,
I'm
do it. No, do it,
into,
it's
just
super
because like,
insightful.
but I think like in like the Buddhist sense, it's just like aggregation, like it's like a density of material that happens that like is then conditional, like on itself or on other forms to keep it alive, and then it's like, but it's impermanent. It could just like, it's like impermanent and ephemeral and like goes away.
Mm.
And it's less like a fall from one state, but it's just like an arising of, it's like the arising of waves in the sea, is like the analog. Whereas like it's not a fall, it's more just like an arising of something in the midst of the whole field. And like, and it can really it really compels us to like identify with it, and therefore it's like, that's where it becomes like suffering, is when we're so identified with it, we're like grinding with it, like
Yeah.
and so that's like, in a sense, that's, and there is a gravitation to that, that to that energy, to like, it's my way, to polemics and that kind of thing, like or our identity, our story of the world, of how it should be. And then like, and that creates violence. I mean, that's the more, and like in a lot of ways, the more people adhere to that, to their idea of reality, it creates violence. So it is kind of this, and it's just like so conditional, and it's so ephemeral, and it ultimately doesn't mean anything. It goes away, it's just like, it's just creating a story, but it is creative energy. It's like, and it's creates it's like a lot of suffering. It's a lot of beauty too. So like, that's the flip side. But that's part of the, but that's part of the thing, is like, we want to create beauty because that's like, the beauty is what we're like really attached to. That's what we really want. But like, we think we can get it by doing this, and this thing, and like creating something, and like making a different world. Blah, blah, blah. When really it's like, the beauty is like always already here, because that's it, So it's like, we gravitate towards these stories rather than just like abiding, or like gravitating towards just being, like the pure beingness. And I think that's like what he talks about with like the will of God, like the will of the divine coming into us.
Oh.
And that's like, abiding in emptiness is like, in like the radiant emptiness, or just abiding with what is like, that's it, like
He does define that as well.
as it is. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's like will, and that's like, and he talks about, I'm gonna jump ahead a little bit just because it's like,
yeah, it's fine,
because this relates, but he talks about how like the intellect and the imagination become subordinate or on equal footing to the will, whereas like, this a kind of opposite thing, where we imagine, we like, in this like gravitational space, we imagine, and then we like intellectualize about it, and then we create, like, that's our grind. But it's like, in this flip side, the hanged man, the upside down, it's the will, and then the intellect, and then the imagination, goes in that direction.
I mean, I agree with that.
So it's kind of that regravitation of the will, it's like, and it's the will of just the divine space. So like, I had this related to what I was saying, but now I feel like I went off too much on a tangent.
I mean, we were talking about the fall and grasping and emptiness, and then you started describing that.
Right. Yeah, I guess it's just it's like, it is like tapping into just a flow. It's like the faith and flow, and what is there.
Well, being present. I mean, I think that's what, so I think you're right. I mean, I definitely, I mean, you are right, but like, I like how you're comparing it to, in Buddhist terminology. I think Buddhist terminology is a lot more gracious and allows for less of this like violent after effects. Like when you call things the fall, and when you say like will above, intellect and imagination, it's like, it sounds very gnarly, and very like, I mean, even bardos sound better than like, the fall, like we're all going through falls all the time. It's like, oh God, and like, you can really get like you said, like addicted to this pattern of expansion that like, I find a lot of my spiritual friends, really are just searching, going through these loops of like, in like a beautiful way. And I mean, I do the same thing, because it's like cool and trendy or whatever, but like of doing these like not cool and trendy because it is very like sacred and spiritually advancing, but like you go through these cycles of like keeping doing these spiritual things that like experiences or excursions or like gnarly trips and things that kind of like wreck you and then rebuild you, and it's like I feel like you can get also caught up in this cycle of like healing, that is like related to this as well. I mean, I'm still kind of for this is also like a new thing that I'm, seeing in my surroundings and trying to like create meaning towards. But yeah, I mean, I just notice a trend of that for my friends. And I think it does relate to this chapter in some way. It definitely related to what we just talked about of like describing things as like these little cycles and then ascribing too much meaning to that also is like a folly point, even if it comes with beautiful results or disastrous results, yeah, I think it's part of the cycle, and just being present, like just having your will, kind of just be that, like it doesn't have to have all of this, yeah, meaning and like you just are, I guess, but I guess it's hard to like know what that looks like until you're in that flow state.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it requires practice and meditation.
Yeah.
And I don't think anything that we're saying he would like disagree with, at some level. But
Yeah,
it's
no.
tricky because the words you use are you have to be careful because it does create like, yeah, the fall does maybe like if I mean for like a casual reader, it might who like wants to believe this stuff, but I don't think a casual reader is gonna read this. And actually like would like, oh yeah, the fall is like evil, like and shameful and like all that. But I think that's not the point, it's not his point.
I mean, I was thinking of giving this to my cousin's husband who, but I keep going back and forth about it because it's like they're very hardcore Christian, but he's like a dude that can like still believe in extraterrestrials, and have conversations about it, so and he's really, really smart and he would really like he likes reading this type of text, but I'm just like, I just don't know how like I'm wondering if he would be able to read it with a critical eye. I don't really know, which I think you really have to have when it comes to this type of material. I mean, at least I would want that for his path, but that's also me ascribing like a little bit too much like, mentorship or whatever, or like mothering, aspects to it where like I don't want to like say how he's supposed to read this book, but like at the same time, like if you do describe so much like this is like the truth like completely, then it's like you can fall into like, I mean, he has a lot of like, I would say seemingly very aggressive ways of talking about certain dichotomies in the world that I think really like pigeonholes a lot of people that like, yeah, live in communist countries or like read Friedrich Nietzsche, like you're just putting them all in this like box where it's like, you're not supposed to look at that, it's like, okay, calm, like you can like people actively live in communist societies today. Like you can't just like say that all of that. I mean, that's not really what he's saying. So that's why you have to have like a critical eye around it, And I would say that like people reading this that come from just a hardcore Christian background without a lot of like hermetic background would be like, oh fuck, like this is super gnarly, like, oh my God. So I would just hope it wouldn't blow somebody's mind too far, Oh, you're cutting out voice.
It's tough to say because it's a challenging read. I mean, it's like it's not easy just to derive like simple answers from any of it, I don't think. and it does feel contradictory at points, and like it's tough, it's like it's a tough read, and I think it might actually challenge criticism on its own grounds even.
Okay. Like it's kind of embedded in the work, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, he's very certain in his writing, but it's like there's so many like layers and subtleties and things he says that are like, and ultimately it's really I worry that I worry that actually like anybody can kind of derive whatever they believe out of some of what he says too.
Which is
Like,
what
because
we do.
I relate it to my own experience of the divine and divinity, like really strong, but I think anybody else might do the same thing or just reject it completely, depending, on the.
I mean, I'm more on this. I mean, I don't reject it completely, but I find a lot of similarities. Like it's hard not to agree with a lot of the things that he says, but I do think that he has a lot of blind spots and to see things that I see on a regular basis. Like I do have active people that are like left-hand pathers. Like that's something that's very much so in my field lately of like just people who I know like identify as that. And like I'm trying to understand what that means because these are people that I've known for a very long time as well. So I'm like now looking at those patterns, which is very interesting. And then like identifying myself as like a middle pather, like what does that kind of like mean in terms of like this balancing act of that? So like, I mean, I would say he'd be what, like a right hand pather? I don't know what the opposite of left hand is, but
Yeah, I think right hand is, yeah,
that's what
very
we
much
call
so.
it.
Yeah.
So that's like
He
more,
even likes all the Hindu stuff that's right hand pathy stuff,
yeah.
because
But I
that's the
don't
stuff
see
he
him talk a
quotes.
lot about left hand path stuff, right? I mean, he
No,
doesn't,
I don't think he understands tantra.
that's what I mean.
I don't think he's studied any like tantra to any great extent.
So I feel like that's something that I have been, it's harder for me to like, I did like now I'm kind of understanding a little bit more why it is like, yeah, I have a tendency more to reject versus like embrace fully, but like but I do embrace whenever I read it, then I'm like, oh yeah, this is awesome, but it's different than my path for sure. Because I
Mhm.
do look, I do feel like I do look at both sides
Mhm.
very equally right now, or should
Me
they
too.
show up in my life in equal amounts of presence.
Yeah. I think it can be helpful for me, but it's not, yeah, it is different. Like in a lot of ways, I'm really attracted to his path and his way because I think it can be really beautiful,
Yeah.
you know. But I don't have a conception of God in the same way. It's like a lot of his articles of faith and stuff. I'm just like, I can't think of it that way,
Yeah.
Just by my very upbringing, it's just like I can't.
This chapter he had a lot of examples from saints, right? Like he talked a lot about Teresa
Mhm.
and different ones. And yeah, I had a harder time relating to that. Like I really liked when he it was later on in the chapter. I mean, I have a lot highlighted before that, but when he talked about there was like uh, a Hindu soul felt one starry night. So like the darkness that it's page
I don't have the
327.
pages. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean
Okay.
this is kind of far in, but at first there was neither being nor non-being, nor kingdom of air, nor sky beyond it, who straddled what and where, who gave shelter and water there, unfathomed depth of water. There was no death then, no, not immortality, no sign of stirring, no curtain of day or night, only one thing, breath, breathed, breathing, without breath, nothing else, nothing whatsoever. Also, there was darkness, darkness within darkness, and darkness of undiscriminated chaos. Whatever existed then was void and formless. Then came the sitting of warmth, giving shape. Then rose desire, the primal seed, the germ of spirit. The searching sages looked in their hearts and knew being was a matter of non-being, and a line cut being from a non-being transversely what was above it and what below it, only my mighty makers, mighty forces, action from flowing freely and a fund of energy. So Song of Creation. Like I really like that.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
And talks about the void and nothing and like, you know, moving from that space. Like that's just such a cool, so I'm grateful for that, like portions like that. And even just finding that passage I'm really grateful for actually, but yeah, not but I just had to read it.
Yeah, and he's talking, getting back to like the gravitation. It's like it's the gravitation towards something that's transpersonal. You know, it's like it's a gravitation towards the transpersonal, which is like the non-ego. It's like the bigger fields, of reality. Like, and there's like let's see if I can relate it to like a more recent, like a late, just later.
Yeah.
Like, I guess.
Well, I mean, he talks about solitude from that.
Towards like, moral, like the moral truth rather than I like that part about the moral logic versus formal logic.
Wait, describe that. I might have not fully read it deeply.
Yeah. So it's like it's like the act of that's the intellect part. Like the intellect uses a formal logic to like figure out things on this plane, like, but it's always conjecture, it's always hypothesis, because there could always be something that could contradict it in some way, the logic. It has to be founded on solid universal principles, but you can't ever know the solid universal principles though, so it's always conditional. I think that's the idea of formal logic. But moral logic is like the logic of the heart, like the one. It's like he uses the example of like how the Jews like condemned Jesus, like because he's like dangerous to the group. So the many is greater than the one in that case. But versus like the moral logic would, and that's like, to preserve the group, we got to sacrifice the one, So the moral logic is like, no, you can't sacrifice the one because the one is just as big or greater than the group, It's like, and the one, and especially in this case, it's Jesus. So of course he's like the holy man that is greater than the whole, But the flip side of that logic, that what ultimately happens is that his sacrifice is what creates the whole redemption of everybody. So it's like that's that kind of irony of it. So it's like, so of course, like, but anyway, I digress.
Well, I mean, that's an argument for just letting the gravitational force be too, and not really like, because you don't really know, like, yeah, sacrificing this man on a cross that was so brutal that like nobody should ever have to go through, like spawned, savior of Christian, I mean, just like the Christian religion, like you can't like, if that would have been an event that was stopped because it was morally, irresponsible or whatever, it's like, that's something that, yeah. So like letting it be and flow the way it's supposed to, like, you're not like, yeah, I don't know. Where I'm trying to get with that thought?
I got caught on one little tangent off of it, but
you can say the tangent. This is a free flow. Or we can move on.
Yeah, I mean the Jesus. Yeah, Jesus.
Yeah, Jesus.
But it's like, yeah, I'm gonna go to digress a little bit. There's so much in Christianity that like so needs to be decoded. Like, that's the thing. If you don't grow up with Christianity, like the meaning of the of the suffering, of the passion and the resurrection of Christ is like, it's so hard to grasp. It's like it needs so much decoding, to figure out the meaning of it. It's like, because it's just this story that comes out of it. It's like, I don't know. So that's what gets me sometimes. It's like it just takes so much, just like creation of a story, and to me that's like what humans do, and that seems arbitrary. You know, there seems like there's an arbitrariness to it that's not it. And that's where I think this author he's so like into the Bible, but there's like so much arbitrariness in the story of the Bible because it's human. It's human interpretations, but at the same time I think he sees a deeper meaning of the Bible than like the vast majority of Christians do, and he actually does grasp the fundamental underlying spiritual truth that like that of all of like that's universal. I think, like, I really believe that.
Yeah. And I think he found it though by looking at it under a microscope, where you could find those same truths without like on a macro level, just like, with this text. Like I don't think you need to go as deep as he did unless you want to, Christian analysis, that's your, path is to make this book, and do things like this. Like that's what you need to do. So
yeah, it's neat. It's like interesting things to think about, like the little tangents in the book, like in this chapter, like there's like tangent about levitation.
yeah, I know, I was just
The
gonna
whole
say that.
levitation thing. It's like these like it's like he's describing how like the spiritual levitation versus like these mediums who can supposedly levitate their physical
Witches,
form. It's like, is that really necessary? It's like so like gets into this theory of like kind of an absurd
it gave me
thing.
anxiety, honestly. Like, I don't know why, but reading
Yeah,
that bit just like gave
yeah,
me, because and I think it brought out this like, I guess, primal fear of like did you ever, so I was raised Christian, and like the Left Behind, or like
yeah,
Not of This World, or
yeah,
whatever. It's like there
yeah.
was a whole series of Left Behind, and we all had to watch it.
Kirk
And
Cameron,
it was so gnarly.
right?
I mean, it was so gnarly. Like,
Yeah.
just thinking one day that like all of your friends and family are just gonna be like levitating up into the sky, and you'll be like alone. Like, it just freaked me the fuck out. So
Yeah.
not that like I was always in the equation of like not being lifted up, which was just so trippy. I guess like good reflection now back then. But when he was writing about that, it definitely felt like a lot of non-denominational churches have definitely taken it to that, where like you have like, oh, everyone that's, of the spirit's gonna be raised up and all the sinners are below, it's like this crazy, like, just like war thing that just always made me feel so uncomfortable. So
Yeah. That's a very I think that's a really Protestant Christian thing. I don't know if Catholics have that as an idea so much.
well, because then that's why he's able to write about it in such a like academic and like impartial way, and maybe not like recognize that, like, I mean, and this was also like what, 40 years ago. So I think that was also like the 90s, where like it really was like, we're in the end times, like
Oh, I mean, there's so much of that still.
yeah.
Oh, I mean, more than ever now.
Yeah.
I think that's the whole Christian right of this country, has that attitude.
I know.
They're like trying to create a civil war so that like it brings it about faster, that kind of shit.
Well, and a
You
lot
know,
of
like
people, Orange County, oh my gosh. I mean, I go places and it's like people are like, it's definitely, I don't think it's just that group that's like, and I mean, preppers are like, a lot more prevalent than like around these parts. And
yeah.
I don't know. We don't need to talk about that, but
Yeah, well, and preppers are more like of the like atheist bent, they're not quite, I don't think preppers have quite that like for the
well,
most
they
part
don't think
that
it's
kind of
going to be,
evangelical kind of attitude.
but I mean, a lot of people think that a lot of people are going to die soon,
Yeah.
So like even you get like a lot of different types of spiritual people that have been saying that, and like that there's, but they said that over COVID too, and that's why a lot of souls left, is because there's a, like bad things are coming. And I'm like, I just feel like these are all like, I'm really trying not to like live in that type of like fear mindset. Like, yeah, I want to like do good in my life and make sure that I like, you know, am healthy and like, you know, but I don't want to like live in the state that like, you know, fuck man, I need to bunker down in my room. Like, I don't want to do that, you know?
No, I mean, and that's like that attitude is totally bound. It's like gravitated in the earth. It's the material.
Yeah.
Like, because it's like it doesn't see the greater faith, you know? It doesn't like it's like so grasping for like me and what's mine, and like gotta hold on to this thing, this ego, this self, you know, because I can't face the annihilation, like the
Yeah.
idea of like of zero, of like total annihilation, which is like at the base of all our consciousness, you know.
Yeah.
And that's what we rebel against in creating the ego. So there is the gravitation towards the ego versus like the ultimate, or the like whatever it is, you know, the field of emptiness.
Yeah.
So it's like there is this, I think there is this like,
Yeah.
and that's exactly what like like I think the author would see as the apocalypse and the revelation is like it's always available to us at all times, you know. It's not like it's not something that actually happens in time in history, and it might in a sense too. It's something that is like available to us, that like we're like the ones who like, it's like the enlightened ones like don't they leave this behind. It's like it doesn't matter. It's
Hmm.
just story. It's just empty. It's like it's impermanent, you know? And that's like, and you don't have to fear anything. And like it really does overcome all evil always, because it's just it is there, you know?
Because there's no room for it and empty.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, like all this is just this like story. It's just a creation. It's just a narrative. It's a fiction, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I like what you said and what the author would agree with, you know, apocalypse is happening, you know, that's just like transcendence in a lot of sense. Like, and that's achieved. I mean, I'm just kind of summing up what you just said so that I get it a little bit more, but that like process is achieved like all the time. Like it's not like a time that is that. It is like a process that can be experienced at any time.
Yeah.
Right? I
Like
mean,
the previous, and yeah, like the previous chapter, I don't remember which one, but he talks about like hell is eternal hell is like, because in God's terms, in the terms of the of of the infinite, their eternity is just like can be a blip. It's like it doesn't correspond to actual like this eternity, because there is no time. In timelessness, like eternity doesn't mean anything. So like you're when you're suffering, you're in hell eternally at any
yeah.
moment, you know.
And like an end is a new beginning. And like don't get caught up in the cycles of, you know, wanting an end for a new beginning. It's just like it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
All
So
right.
yeah, all this like prepping and stuff is just kind of like, you know.
Yeah. I
And
mean, I think the aesthetic is kind of cool just because I'm into
yeah, sure.
fashion and stuff, you know, but so I really like the like art that's coming out of this, like, you know, little phase
uh,
of, you know, whatever
yeah,
we're in. Cause yeah,
yeah,
like brutalist and, you know, kind of like survival gear. Like I've never been more
yeah,
comfortable like being in high fashion than I am right now, which is really
yeah.
cool. But yeah, I don't know. Beyond
And a
that, I
part
mean,
of
I
me
kind of,
wants to grasp to that too. Like, oh, be cool to live longer and make a cool world. But
yeah, I mean, I still have like a lot of things in my ego of like wanting to propel for the future. Like, um, so for me, like my journey's not done and I wouldn't want it to be right now. But I mean, I know that at some point in my spiritual journey, I will want that, you know, like just to not have those attachments there probably of
Yeah.
wanting to do that. But I mean, I feel like for the people that I love around me, that's kind of like what I want to like propel for the future. But yeah, and that might change, and I'm open to that being changed, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, I think there's also just a nobility in like helping the preppers with some philosophical ideas, because like, so what gets kind of lost in a lot of that, I think, is the spirit, is like the ability to like see the expansiveness, because it gets so caught up in like survival mode, that
But
it
I
like
mean, I do,
loses the like why do it,
I mean, sometimes I always think it's like equal and opposite. I think that if we were in pure survival state all the time, there is a lot of freedom there. And I mean, it's constant fear. So it depends on what type of survival you're talking about. But like, if you're equipped, I mean, I'm watching like Alone, the series, and it's just throwing people in the middle of the wilderness and being like, survive as long as you can. But it's like, you do have to just get into like this flow of the environment, and you're faced with all of your like things that would need to, so if you don't have any of that, then like that could be a really blissful state, because there's like no, like you're just about like you're in animal state, and it's very within flow of like what's going on. And there's like, if you've survived, if you function really well in that state, then there's a lot of freedom there for you. So I think that's also what a lot of people are attaching. I mean, at least like family members that I know are attaching onto is like, I'd be really good at this because like I know how to do all these things. I think living in that state would be different, but I think in this like pre-time, what I'm seeing for spiritual people is that fear that's kind of around that. So that's more of what I'm trying to like, I guess, just like how, yeah, just talk to people about or something.
Yeah. I mean, I see the fear as like, it's also kind of like, it's not it's not actually helping the world possibly get out of that,
No, the
for
fear
the
is,
most part. The fear is just creating more of it, like speeding up the end,
and like taking really spiritually like equipped people out of the equation. Like
Yeah.
I mean, I've been talking to, yeah, I mean, this just like came up the other night, and it's like, I mean, this very, very, very spiritually gifted family. It was like, I mean, they experienced a passing, and it's just thrown them for a loop in ways that's like, there are bad things coming, and it just kind of takes them out of the equation of like hope for the future, or
Yeah.
like, and I think that when you're in such a position of like authority spiritually to like other people that are around you, and that's like part of your thing, like I do feel like there's a lot of responsibility there to like not drag other people into that fear state, unless that's how you're getting, unless again then there's like darkness around that, where is that how you're like gaining power? Like there's a lot of like things that like I'm like really iffy about that equation. Like I wouldn't go around spreading that like there's going to be a fucking flood or that people are all going to die pretty soon. Like you just don't say shit like that. Like
Yeah.
even if you've seen things are going to happen, like you don't know what that means. Like visions are very subjective. That's like the nature of them, like is that it's something that you're going through and that you need to interpret for that. And a flood might be a flood of ideas. Like it doesn't have to be a whole excuse my language, but you can
Yeah.
see how passionate I am about this, because I'm just
Yeah.
like, I don't like that that was like said to me in that way. And I don't like that it's being justified for some like really atrocious, horrible thing that happened. And like, I mean, again, it's maybe it's a coping mechanism for them. And like,
Yeah.
I'm just thinking out loud. And sorry for my rant, or
Yeah.
thank you for listening to my rant. And I mean, if I'm wrong, like
Yeah.
never show me that I'm wrong, but like, that's how I'm feeling about the subject right now.
It reminds me of this book. I'll bring it back to the book.
Cool,
And
thank
it
you.
is actually, this actually is, I think, really relevant, is that he talks about, the difference between, this is a little bit later in the chapter, the difference between, and it's another one of his like kind of off on tangent things, because he's like theorizing about, um, like vision, the spiritual vision experience.
Okay.
So like the difference between like the transsubjective, or like the, what does he call it? Hold on.
Yeah, I remember that part.
He talks about, where's that? Anyway,
I mean, I see divine call, but it's not quite that.
but like, yeah, the vision that comes from, okay, yeah, the division that comes from like purely the divine, like just like, it's like the example he uses is Saint Teresa's like vision of Jesus. She doesn't see him with her eyes, but she knows his presence like in her heart, and the difference between that and like the vision of, where you actually do see it, but it's like it's like a different part of you being activated. And this is an interesting examination of like the chakras too, right? Because he relates it to the chakras. But and then like just the vision of like the clairvoyant, who just like sees something and just like, oh, this is it, like the one who takes it literally, or like whatever, like it's like and there's like a subtle difference, and like, and what I think what he ultimately says is like the authentic is like, in your heart, like it's like good for your soul, it's like, and I think to me it's like it's fearless, it's like, in a sense, it's like the presence of like Jesus, the divine, like you compare it to
Mhm.
Jesus, like it's the presence of like the most loving, kind, like embrace, like the loving God, that's the authentic vision, you know that's what it comes down to. So like vision that like inspires like a contraction is like fear, and it's just like it's propels the like the suffering, because it's because suffering is its nature,
Mhm.
so like if you act on this vision coming out of fear, you think it's authentic because it's like it's there, but then like, but your automatic like interpretation of it is like a fearful response, a fear response, and then you act on that fear, and and you just propel that energy forward
Yeah.
in the world. And that's like, it's
Which I mean,
authentic
again,
in the sense it's authentic in the world, but it's not like,
is
it's
that a
not
left
like
hand
the ultimate authenticity.
is that a left hand path method? Like, would that be?
I think it's interesting. I think again, it's like, well, it's like, what is the left hand path? I think the left hand, I mean, my understanding of like, is that the left hand path is going to the same place, that it's always going to the same place. And I don't see that going to the same place. I see that just spiraling, and it's actually like a lack of control. There's actually like, you're just like, it's chaotic. There's no like, you don't have will, you're lost in it, actually. That's what I see as that kind of left hand path, because I think it
Oh,
like you lose yourself a little bit in that, because you're like, or you're like, you're so caught up in self, you get caught up in self. With the left hand, my understanding of like Hindu and Buddhist tantra is that you
yeah.
like it's like tasting the poison in order to inoculate yourself. That's a Chogyam Trungpa metaphor, I think.
Ooh, that's cool.
Yeah, yeah, it's like that's the idea of like Hindu tantra. And this stuff is like, goes way back. And you like, you fucking like meditate in burial grounds to like death, and like, you contemplate the like total annihilating force of Kali, like the goddess Kali,
Mhm.
that kind of shit. And that's like getting dark, and like you might do like blood sacrifice and stuff like that. That is part of the left hand path, but it's like you're not caught, but it's like in order to like embrace it like lovingly, and like Kali is like a loving goddess, like ultimately represents like pure compassion, in its annihilation, because it's annihilating demons, all demons, so it's like nothing to fear, but it's like ferocious and bloody, it's that's I think that's what I see as like the left hand path. So it's like, yeah, I think there might be something to like embracing your ego so much, but you have to be aware of it, like it requires a certain amount of mindfulness, um and it requires like, I think like left hand path can get so caught up that what people call left hand is so caught up in the ego that like you can't, you're actually like bound, you're bound by the devil. I think the devil card will talk about this stuff, but and coming up in a couple, but like it's
Yeah.
like a non-open space. So in it's, I mean, but it's okay.
No, thank you for that. I definitely think that, I mean, yeah, and what I understood about, left hand path is like it can't operate outside of will. So like that's still like a part of the equation. Like there's not, and um I think you're right. Like a fear state isn't really on us, either one of those, like any of the paths, right? Like that's just like being outside of faith.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the difference there, is like it's not, right. I mean,
But
is
you
that
can
how you
do
were saying?
stuff.
Like I'm summarizing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, but you can do stuff to like embrace your fear, and stuff like that.
But
Like
to
let
propel
it come
fear
alive,
in a chaotic
like,
way.
yeah. But just to like go with it and like live your life from that place, it's not particularly conducive to like a true like spiritual
I mean,
revelation,
maybe
I don't
that's
think.
why a lot of Western left hand path people have a lot of trouble, because of the
Mhm.
Christian kind of like undertones of just our entire like society in America, like that'd be really hard to navigate, because you don't have like Kali to like really like, I mean, you do, because that's a god, you could create a space for that, but that's not really like a socially acceptable like thing to like talk about or do, or even embracing chaos or embracing like destruction in that kind of way is really seen more of the devil, and more in a way that like promotes like demons instead of like annihilating demons, and that's
Yeah.
a really big
Or
difference.
or even making friends with demons, it's like the whole like and that's what I think like Jason's criticism would be similar to this too, is that like people like are summoning demons and trapping them in triangles, and like commanding them to do their will, like that's a good idea. It's like, but you're just doing it for your own like self-aggrandizement,
Yeah.
and that's like, so what, you can, I think Jason put it this way too, like just become a stock trader and do that, like why bother trapping a demon, like
That's
just
funny.
like join the military,
Yeah.
get empowered that way, like I don't know, do
Right.
something, become a politician, I don't know. Yeah,
That's funny.
it's like, but yeah, like trapping demons and like, yeah, when like, but
Like I think
you can
there's a
summon,
method
but
for
like the
that.
other left hand pathway is like to summon a demon and like, or like as a spirit, like a nature spirit, because they're all the same, they're just all part of like the transpersonal like field of energy, um but but like make friends with it, understand it, like
Yeah.
converse with it, don't just command it, and be
Like that's it's
wary
a
of it because it might have its own agenda, like with whatever you do. But if you command it, then like it has a way of coming back and destroying you. Oh, by the way, like, did you see the Sandman series by chance? Oh, I think you'd like it.
Okay,
It's
yeah.
great. Yeah,
I
watch the
love that song.
Sandman.
I'm gonna look it up right
Yeah,
now.
but it's like, but like the beginning of it, I'm gonna give a little bit of a away
It's
because,
okay. Fine. I'm fine with that.
but the beginning of it
Spoiler
is like
alert,
this
YouTube people.
magician, this like this 20th century, like early 20th century magician, like kind of Crowley-esque or something. Like he's like trying to summon death, right? And command death to like keep him immortal or whatever. And but he accidentally summons the dream, who's the Sandman, and that's what the whole premise is. But like, but that's, he traps the dream in a cage for like 100 years, like his family inherits it basically, while he has some of the tools, so he's able to like do like magic and stuff with that. And like, but then like, of course, dream is like eternal, and like he'll come back,
Yeah.
he'll get out eventually, and you'll be sorry.
Yeah.
But it's like, that's what it shows, is like, that's what happens when you fuck with that shit
Oh my
for
gosh.
your own self-aggrandizement.
Yeah.
It's like these demons are old and they don't forget,
Yeah.
when you do.
Man.
And they're probably a lot smarter than you are.
Yeah. I mean, just in time wise, yeah, timeline wise. Cool. I mean, thank you for that insight. And that definitely sheds light into some things that I think are very relevant in my life right now. Not in my life personally, but like the things that I see around me. Yeah.
You've got a lot of darkness around you, it sounds like, in a way.
Right now. Yeah.
People.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how. There's just been a few events lately that have been like very challenging and shed light to a little bit deeper of an experience than I knew was there. Like, I mean, I have to be super vague because this is YouTube, like being recorded, but I mean, we could talk about it in a bit. And then just things have been, but I think it's just the time that I'm supposed to have my eyes open to some of this stuff, like I don't see it as anything beyond that. And there's nothing like it's because I have a good safeguard right now. Like I really understand how to play in this space and be very like safe in the space that I've created from it. And like, I don't invite things in, and I know like how to create boundaries with people and with like spirits. So like, I really don't feel like that's why it's like allowed to come into my like frame of view right now. And I mean, I'm just trying to like understand and learn from it. And yeah, I do think that this chapter, that's what I'm kind of in like an in-between for in a few different ways. And I think that's like kind of one of the ways that I am, it's like understanding what this like means for my spiritual path in the future, and it's interesting because it's stuff from my past that's like being brought forward and being shed new light as to what happened based on that, and like how like what's gonna move, how that's gonna move forward. It's just really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you're like good at just allowing like other people to have their trip, like that's all,
I mean,
that's
what are you
all
gonna
you can
do?
do.
Yeah.
That's all you can do. And like
Yeah.
it comes at you and it like relates to your life maybe in some ways, but you're setting your boundaries, so that's exactly what that's all you can do.
Yeah. And
like,
share some tips for some people who ask about how to create boundaries. It's like, lay off the drugs and like, do a little more meditation. Like that's, step number one. But yeah, I mean, other than that, like, but thank you for saying that.
I mean, people are really struggling right now.
Yeah, I know.
Like,
really struggling.
Yeah.
It's heavy, like there's a lot of heaviness in certain situations.
Yeah. I feel like extremely, I almost feel like I'm like so distant from it or something, because I am such a hermit. But also Colorado is like, there's something here that's like it's lighter somehow, I think, than a lot of places. And maybe like I know there's darkness in this city, like big time, like big time, you know. But like, and people like really struggling. But I don't know. I don't see it every day. There's so many nice people out. You know, people smiling and waving and, you know, saying hello, you know, strangers in my neighborhood, whatever, you know, that like people, I think in a lot of ways, I see people doing all right, but I know it's not the same in a lot of places. So
Yeah.
that's just,
I agree, and I feel
yeah,
you. Like Orange
yeah,
County is definitely more of a bubble than anywhere, you know, else in California. Maybe not everywhere else, but like a lot of other places in California. And you go 30 minutes in either, you know, maybe an hour in either direction, and you have just like mass chaos states, you know.
yeah,
So that's more of who I associate with art scenes. So it's more like I can have, that's what I mean by like I'm in a safe space as well. Like I have more of a periphery to a lot of those type of things. I mean, but things are coming a little bit closer. Like there is a lot of poverty in Orange County right now as well. So I mean, there's poverty everywhere. So that's just, with that has a
yeah,
heaviness of a lot more like working, which is different than like darkness of like drugs and like, you know, crime and chaos, but
yeah,
it's
yeah,
more just like really like hard working people not being able to afford things, which is
yeah,
really fucking unfortunate, you know?
yeah. That's, yeah. I see a lot of that here too. Yeah, it's bad.
Yeah.
It's bad. Yeah.
But that's,
No, I mean the economic conditions. Yeah. It's almost a different story. I
yeah,
think, like you said.
I
Yeah.
know it almost is.
But like, because people are just still like living to try to survive, like, and in that way it's like what you're talking about, the purity of that, you know, of just trying to survive. I think there is something to that, you know.
Yeah.
But like versus like the people who are like maybe a little more well off and maybe have a little more power, like creating this fear situation and, you know,
And again,
perpetuating.
like getting something out of it. Like
Yeah,
like
because yeah, power. Yeah,
there's this equation that just like I just really don't find just about that, you know.
yeah.
But I need to tread lightly there when it comes to when you're talking about spiritual people who are in poverty states that have experienced these things that are propelling this type of messaging, because it's like, is that coming
Oh,
from you or is that coming from something else, you know? And like
right.
what are you feeding with
Yeah,
that? So I'll just need to think about, I mean, I might not even have,
right.
like that might not be somewhere that I go in my journey right now, but it's
Yeah.
interesting to think about.
I mean, I just wonder about like, yeah, there's so much propaganda vying for attention that like, yeah, who's manipulating who, you know, who's your master is always the question you should ask.
Right.
Again, obedience, like who's your master? Like, do you want like a loving God to be your master who just like loves you no matter what? Sure. And has your totally un, un and like inevitably and like in all ways has your best interest in mind. Yeah. You know, like, that's my master.
Yeah. Is it? Wait, is it actually, or are you being sarcastic?
No, yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. Though, like the loving, like open, just totally, totally compassionate deity is like the only master that you know, like,
Oh, yeah.
but that's hard. I have a lot of other masters. He says you can't serve two masters. In this chapter, he says that. And I definitely see like many masters vying for my, you know, but I can't fully serve any of them, you know,
I don't think I've
because
thought about any
there's
of those
like,
myself.
there's so much like I do get caught up politically, like thinking about that stuff, you know, and like become pretty like polemicized, you know, in the very like liberal, like, you know, dimmer sort of way. But I really do try to see from other people's perspectives. But that's just the thing. It's like when you just come at it with pure like love, when like the love hits you, like all the evil just disperses, it's just like you can have compassion for everybody, and that's like, and then like there is no evil in the world anymore. It's done, like you've eradicated evil, and it's just like inevitable and always, all this other stuff is just like just the bubblings of the imagination. It doesn't mean anything at all.
That's really beautiful. Yeah, I definitely need to do some thought. I've never really, I mean, and it is something that is very predominant in my life. I mean, my names, like my background, like there's like, and I mean, even like my tattoos, like a spiritual healer once said, like, you have like binds around your arms, like that's like a slave thing. Like, did you know that was like a slave thing? Like, there's like a lot of like, and that's always tripped me out, because it's like surrounded by my mom and grandma and me, little crest. So that's kind of interesting too. But I mean, and it might more represent like if it were to be like what I thought it would be more like I'm bound to them too, because I definitely think that, like, I mean, at least my mom, like we for sure like met in other lifetimes and stuff like that, if that's like part of their paradigm thing or whatever. But I mean, this like slave master, and I mean, black and white, like I have like my dad's black, my mom's white, like, there's like his last name's Owens, like being owned, like my mom's last name's Strickland, being strict, what I mean? Like there's just kind of these like, right? Really. And I'm just putting this together like within the past like couple weeks. So I'm just like, it's interesting, I've never really like asked, like, I'm glad you said that. And like, are asking, like brought it to light in that way. Like, what masters do you serve? Like, I'll definitely need to think about that, like in that way. Like, I mean, my immediate mind comes to creation and creative force, but I don't know what that looks like for me,
Yeah. Or as Killer Mike says, kill your masters.
Well, anarchy, like I am my own master,
Yeah.
It's like left hand.
I mean, that's his whole thing. I think it's beautiful. I think he's like, see, Killer Mike is one of these people who has the know. Like he knows the true spirit, like kill your masters, because
why not?
Yeah, well, that's freedom, because that's how you get freedom, that's the basic truth of that statement.
I mean, that's how you get void, at least.
Yeah.
In terms of like probably your own karmic like equation, right?
Yeah.
That's really interesting. What time is it? 7:17? I mean, I don't have anywhere to be, but
but I like it. It's like, but yeah, I'll continue with the chapter in the book. It's like, yeah, your only master is, in his case, is God, because that's all that, that's all that's real, and eternal. And that's like, and that's the obedience portion, which is so important to this chapter. The obedience is like, here, the hanged man is just obedient to the divinity because he's bound, because he's like surrenders his like will of the earth, he's bound and hung, so ultimately it is obedience, and then the will comes through and then can act from that.
That's trippy. I mean,
there is something very tantric about this chapter, about this card, in that sense, if you think about it. It's like you bind yourself and hang yourself upside down, just like to surrender, no more. It's like you're sacrificing yourself in that sense.
Yeah, it's heavy, mean, it makes me uncomfortable in like certain ways, but I think it's because ascribe his, God to it, and it gives me like childhood anxiety.
Yeah. Yeah. I know it frustrates me too. That totally does. Like his conception of God, I think, is like, I get it, but I can't get it quite.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
Anyway.
Um, I'm going to do a quote because I think this might be relevant. Now, authentic faith brings with it absolute certainty, above all, when it is not limited to the will alone, but succeeds in making understanding and imagination also participants in the experience. That's what we were talking about before.
Mm. Oh, that's a good quote. That clarified some stuff, I think, that I had.
Okay, yeah, wait, what?
It's the that it's what it's saying is that authentic faith is what you get when it's like he's defining like the experience of authentic faith there by when you realize that your imagination, will, and intellect are all um like in line with it, are all like engaged by it, by that faith, by the truth, by the absolute idea that you have. Is
Yeah.
isn't that what he's saying there?
I think so, yeah. Now I'm just relating it to my own life though, and that does make a lot of sense. Now, authentic faith brings with it absolute certainty, above all, when it is not limited to the will alone, but succeeds in making understanding and imagination also participants in its experience.
Mm. Yeah, that's yeah. Absolute certainty and engaging understanding and imagination
With the will
with the
as
will.
participants. So, like in those three in tangent,
Yeah.
um, if you have a faith, if you have something that you want to have faith in, you need to analyze it from a way of will, understanding, and imagination in order to see if it has the potential of absolute certainty.
Yeah. I
Right?
like that.
Is that
Yeah.
the logical breakdown?
That seems like it.
I took my ex-boyfriend's logic class, so.
Like if you feel certain, examine it for those traits too. Yeah. Like if it doesn't have those, I don't know, but it's interesting because I feel like those traits are very much alive in people who have faith in all kinds of like crazy ass shit. That's what's tricky about that. It's like, what does that really entail?
But it's not certain. I mean, that's what I mean by like in the equation of spreading, apocalypse. And let's say in the example of apocalyptic fear, right? The world's gonna end. Like, I think that fails the will equation, like the will portion of that equation, because yes, you can imagine it, and yes, you can understand how the world is going to an end, but is it you're supposing your will of the world to end onto other people? And that's where I think it falls flat, right? Because
Yeah, that's
your version of
interesting.
an apocalypse isn't going to be my version of an apocalypse, right?
Yeah. And you can't be certain.
That I'm going to die in an apocalypse. I might be a survivor.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't be certain from that point of view because you're like operating out of like the fear, which is like you don't it's like with fear there's no real faith, right? Because you can't like because faith is like you just let it. It's like I I I give in, like it's it. Fear is like you're trying to manipulate the situation for your own gain, and then you're applying like the formal, like again, kind of like the formal logic that he talks about, and just like creating your own story.
So you're hindering others' will, like you're
And you're hindering others. Yeah, you're hindering others' will, and because you don't have certainty, because you're fearful. Like
I mean, but again, people can be not fearful and still think the world's going to end and like be very like certain about it. But is it absolutely certain? No. You
Yeah.
know, like that's kind of what maybe he's saying in sentences.
Well, that's conjecture about the world, you know.
Yeah.
You're not like certain in, I mean, yeah, you could say like, yeah, the world's going to end, but like, I feel I know I am certain of that. Of course, like that's obvious. Like everything ends. You know,
Yeah.
it's like in soon in my lifetime, sure, like it might happen that way. Like, and it very well might, you know, like the end of humanity as we know it or whatever. But
I
like,
mean, everything
what do I
trans.
do with that information if I don't like, if I don't care, if I don't fear it? Like, it's like, you know, maybe I'll try to like be a better person and like spread some spiritual ideas and like maybe some things will stick if some humanity left, but like what else is there, you know, like for me. I
Yeah.
could fear it and like try to manipulate the situation for my gain. Or I could like naturally like I could just like respond to it as from like a, and I think even like there's a natural fear that's like faithful fearing, even like you're disconnected to your fear where you like you just like still are in the world and you want to preserve yourself and stuff, but you're not like trying to like empower yourself through it, you know.
Mm.
It's like there's, I think there's just, we're infused with that like from a natural place anyway, like from the universe. So it's,
Yeah.
again, I think it gets back to like what you're talking about with like that purity of just surviving, you know. It's kind of that similar thing, like, and it's not fear in the same way. It's like a different kind of fear. So I
Yeah.
don't know, maybe there's that.
It's interesting.
There's like fear out of faith, and like fear out of like and like the test is in the heart. Like, is it touching the heart? Is it like, and is your will like being propelled not to control other people? Your will is compelled to like let yourself survive, but also like embracing others, helping others survive as well, you know, or something like that. I think that's where it's true. Like,
I think so too.
but that's tricky. Like, when does like the power trip come in
Well,
that
and it
like
just
in that
depends on
balance?
how you're defining it. Like, you can't really know, like, what, you just need to flow with what's going to happen in terms of like a world timeline thing. And, like, yeah,
Mhm.
analyze why, what messaging you're saying, and like what motives you have for it, and like how you're interacting with other people's wills. Like, you can have absolute certainty on a group of people in some regards, but it's really fucking like not, it's not gonna have consistent, like, you're not always get like, not every message that's like a faith message is going to be an absolute certainty when it's talking about more than one person's will. Like, it's easier to do
Yeah.
that just about yourself, but when you start
Yeah.
trying to put yourself in other people's like eyes, and especially if you're talking about all of humanity, or like a
Mhm.
big catastrophic like event, I mean, that's more of what I'm saying when I'm defining like apocalyptic event,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
so that's where I think it doesn't, it always won't meet this equation, because you're saying you have too many other people's wills coming in play here. Like, whether it comes from just the earth's perspective of will, maybe, like, yeah, and we all die, so like we
Yeah.
all go through an apocalypse of some sort, and the earth will go through changes like it always does. But like, to know when and where and how, like, it's not going to fall, like, you're not going to know. We're not going to be able to know that. I don't
Yeah.
think, you know,
Yeah.
we can slowly build it, like, smoking, like you're slowly going towards that, but like, do you know if you're going to get, no, like, do you
Yeah.
know if this is going to like tip it, or if we're going to change it around? No. Like, there's always a point of that,
Yeah.
I think. Not that
Yeah.
I'm not denying anything, but I'm just like trying to like be realistic about the equation, like just the like,
Right.
you
Yeah,
know.
I like that. Like, and I think you're right. Like, and that absolute certainty is like a special case. Like, and it is like a spiritual thing, I think. Like, you're like and it is and the only thing you can absolutely be certain about is like this divine state or whatever.
The divine state, and then your position within that divine state.
Yeah.
Like if
Yeah.
you're talking about other people's positions in those divine state, you're always going to have a little bit of like, you know, are you?
Yeah.
And then you can, there are very rare cases where that's absolutely true. But yeah, I think in this equation, like it's easier to just talk about from your own perspective. If you know an absolute truth for yourself and it meets these equations, then like that's more likely to be true than like a fool.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good point. And I think that's something that like I wish he had said something along those lines, you know, not about other people. I think that's a really, really good proof of his equation.
I think though that he wouldn't say that. Like I don't think he would be
Yeah.
like, I think his faith would prevent him from saying something like that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of times that's what frustrates me is like he's like has this absolute certainty about these things that are based on like stories in a Bible that could be, and like his earlier chapter where he talks about agregors, you know, and like how agregors are all human created and they're not divine. And I can't help but see like the Bible itself as an egregore, you know, like, and it contains, and I think he does a really good job decoding the egregore and getting at the universals, right? Because there's like universals, but then there's the story within the story, you know, in the story, you can get so caught up in the story that you have faith in the story, and then like, but yeah, I think that's his trap, like a little bit. He's like basing some of his like the way he conceives of these things, the way he talks about it on these conjectures, these egregores, these just like fallible human.
It just pigeonholes you a little bit because you can't. I think
Mhm.
he can't expand in that.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I just don't think even like, I don't know if that, like his mind won't take it there, maybe like, because that's, I mean, I don't know. That's not
But
very nice to say, but you know, I just don't think that that's something that like his training would have like taken him to that conclusion, because like you do make assumptions about like entire groups of people when you're saying like there's like people, you know, like when
yeah,
there's like a lot of constraints with Christian faith that I think like
yeah,
typecast people in like too hardcore of a way. I mean, maybe his faith doesn't have that, but like from what I can see, like I don't like the rhetoric that's being said about groups of people that like
yeah,
you don't have experience like living through their eyes. Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think what was I gonna say? I was gonna say something about your insight. Yeah, I lost it.
okay. I mean, he did go right after that and said, and I really like this for um how I'm just really glad he said this, like for how I view magic and like my practice, like the mother of Christian Hermeticism is Kabbalah and the father is Egyptian Hermeticism. I really liked that just in terms of like how, because a lot of people ask like what is magic and like what, you know, and then I have to like go into like a little bit like, oh, you know, the foundational kind of elements are the Kabbalah and the, you know, Egyptian Hermeticism and Greek, you know, mythology in a lot of ways, or Greek, I guess, you know, theory, like logos kind of thought. Um, but I like that he said like mother and father in that.
Yeah,
And it's like, do not deny your mother and father. Like I thought that was like a really cool application of
yeah,
those two things for esoteric path, you know?
yeah, yeah. And it's true. It's like he really is like getting to a lot of that. And actually, when you look at like the history of the thinking, you actually come to you see that too. You know, like
Yeah.
it's like the Hermetic stuff is all like Greco, and he says Egyptian, it's Greco-Egyptian. You
Oh,
know, it's like
okay.
it really is, and like because that's what it all comes down
Same
from.
time
And
period.
like yeah, and then like these thinkers like who was it? Porphyry, he's like 4th or 5th century Roman citizen philosopher, Neoplatonic, who like, or maybe it wasn't Porphyry, it was one of those guys around his time. Anyway, he was like really into the Hermetic stuff. Like he quotes like Hermetic philosophy and stuff. So, and he's like, and he was really influential on like the church fathers and stuff, who were like the early Christian theologians, and like, you know, so that is there is a actual traceable lineage in that stuff, which is cool. Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like it.
He knows his shit when it comes to the history and stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
But he gets things wrong too, I'm sure. And he's gotten things wrong about like Buddhism, I think. Not wrong necessarily, but just like only half the picture.
Well, and like this would be really cool. Yeah, again, stay in your lane, buddy, you know, a little
Yeah.
bit.
But at the same time,
I like all the
he uses
anecdotes,
it.
though. Like some of them are my favorite quotes in here, you know. But
Yeah, he quotes the Rig Veda, which is like way older. I think that's like that Rig Veda quote that you read, the
yeah.
beautiful. I think that's like way older than the Kabbalah. I mean, the Hermetic stuff.
Oh
The
yeah.
Hermetic stuff. It's like really ancient India, like way back.
Right.
So yeah, and that's like roots of a lot of it. I think there's like roots in that.
Yeah, the Vedic
Right.
traditions. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
even, you know, I'm not a theologian or, you know,
Yeah.
historian, but that's like if I were to learn anything, it'd be like Sanskrit, you know, like, you
Yeah.
know, you could just do that and like be enlightened like super easy, you know, but
Yeah.
I'm shit at languages.
But that's the thing, and I think what you're saying, oh yeah, I was gonna verify, confirm kind of what you're saying is like as an inoculation against bias a little bit too, is like you understand your own bias in your revelation of faith, of like of what you're saying, you know, of certainty, of that certainty. You're aware of your bias, so you don't inflict it on anybody else, you know, like, and
Yeah.
therefore, like, that is the beauty of like the power of silence, right? In some
Yeah.
ways, like him writing this at all, because it can only come from bias. Like language comes from, and storytelling comes from biases, you know, and he can only come from his own historical time and place and what he knows, which is limited by necessity. And we're all limited by only what we know, and how we conceive of anything, how we define any kind of thing, anything at all.
Yeah.
And it always contains bias, our biases, you know.
Yeah. But that's
But
part of
that awareness.
that's part of the separation that we need to experience though, like I guess,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Understand like what your perspective means and what being alone means and contributing and touching the void in that way. Like I think it's
Yeah. Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, I like that.
A living tradition is not a current of word of mouth, but rather a series of revelations and endeavors. True.
Yeah.
Let me just see.
Yeah, it's like, and he like he admits that it's like really hard to like totally submit, like totally spiritualize. And that makes me think of like the bodhisattva. I think the hermetic path, as he describes it, is a bit similar to like bodhisattva. It's like you see the end goal of like of total union with the divine, but you kind of hang back in the world a little bit, you know. You hang back in order to save other beings. That's the bodhisattva way. I think that's kind of that seems like the hermetic way too. You know, you like touch the void, but you don't fully jump in.
Probably, yeah.
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 Well, he kind of says that straight up in a few places.
Yeah, I mean,
that's what I read into it anyway. In this chapter, even.
Is that, yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know. Is that like a definition that's up for interpretation, or is that it is the hermetic way, you know?
I mean, I think he kind of has that.
That's his hermetic way for sure.
From my interpretation of it, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I have a copy of the hermetic texts, like
Corpus
the Hermes
Hermeticum.
Yeah.
I think it is.
But I haven't delved too much into it.
I know.
Some of it just feels like so like just so airy, like that I can't quite. it's like a lot of stuff that has to be like penetrated through like revelation, which is
Yeah,
hard for me with
I
some of
know.
that.
He had a couple book recommendations in this chapter that I actually looked up and I think I'm going to get, just by Hermes Trismegistus, that I think like are going to be really hard reads, but like, I mean, maybe they're going to be really like poetic, but
They are.
right. Okay. So, I mean, I think that's like, those are important things to have, I think, for me,
Yeah, for
um,
sure.
just as that. But I mean, I definitely view my hermetic path right now as like alchemizing my space in order to, touch the divine, which would be to get in touch with my, HGA/daemon, or whatever, and then kind of
Yeah.
understand how to navigate through creating a future for that before I don't want to anymore, and like
Yeah.
to like have that be a part of my like touching the void more and like being in that space a little bit more. But I mean, I know I like that part of, yeah, living my life is like that journey of like, I'm in the alchemizing phase, and I'm just now reaching out, like I'm in.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool to roadmap it like that.
Yeah. I like that.
Um, I'm gonna do some final kind of quotes, right?
Yeah.
So page 310, I am is the formula of revelation in the world of the existence of the divine essence of Jesus Christ. I really liked that because that was like, I am, that's a very Vedic kind of thing to say, right?
Yep.
Like the I and I am.
It's just like it's the full isness of space, as the Buddhists would say. Yeah.
It's kind of cool he related that to Jesus.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, and then I guess we could leave it with this. We must not only see and think clearly, but also will clearly, for one cannot serve two masters at once. That's literally
Yeah.
what you said. So yeah, willing, I think that's a good like takeaway from this chapter is like really understand your will and like
Yeah.
try to have that come from the divine, and don't take things as absolute truth without really clearly identifying them as your will, as something you understand, as something you imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's like it's because you're turning yourself upside down. So like you take things as not as they seem anymore, like everything is you can't have any faith in your own intellect, your own like interpretations. It's like the only what else is there then? That's the question it asks. Like
Mm.
if you're like, yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah. Um, tapping into the divine is kind of what you're saying, right?
Yeah, I mean tapping into like what is I almost want to say like you turn yourself upside down so that you can like you're not you're not struggling to like figure it out anymore. You're just like you're just in it, or like you're not the intellect trying to like piece it together and understand it bit by bit is like subordinate to like something else, and ask what else is there if you don't if you're not, if you give up, if you surrender your will,
Mm.
your body, your mind, your spirit in this order,
Yeah.
like what else is there, like
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. All right. End recording. Any final words? No. Bye.